Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Suddenly widowed, the woman hesitated for a long time before sitting behind the wheel of her husband's car, but while cleaning out his things from the glove compartment before selling it, she found something that turned her life upside down. Welcome to our channel. If you enjoy our story, don't forget to subscribe and like. Thank you for your support, and we wish you a pleasant listening experience. Maria stirred her cold coffee mechanically. The spoon clinked softly against the sides of the cup, a sound that had once irritated Carlos. Now, this sound filled the emptiness that had settled in their apartment after his death. 32 days, she thought, 32 days without you. A ray of sunlight pierced through the loosely drawn curtains, falling on a family photograph, a smiling Carlos hugging Maria and their daughter against the backdrop of the Playa del Carmen beach. Their last vacation together last summer, the last, as it turned out. The sound of a door slamming in the bedroom reached her. Valeria had locked herself in again. Maria sighed. 17, a tough age even in normal circumstances, let alone with such a tragedy in the family. Valeria, breakfast is ready. Maria called, though she already knew the outcome. Silence in response, only silence, the exhausting emptiness that had filled their home in the last few weeks. Maria stood up from the table and walked over to the window. Below, in the parking lot, stood her husband's black sedan, dusty, with dirty splashes on the sides. Carlos would never have allowed his car to be in such a state. A car is a man's face, he used to say, cleaning the interior to a shine every weekend. Her phone vibrated on the table, Banamex, yet another reminder of an overdue payment. After the funeral, Maria had to deal with her husband's paperwork, and the discovery was shocking. Carlos, always so meticulous with financial matters, had left behind considerable debts. This must be a mistake, Maria had said to the bank manager, nervously fiddling with her purse strap. Carlos couldn't have. He was always so careful. The young man in a suit looked at her with pity. Unfortunately, the debt is documented. Your husband may have had unforeseen expenses. That phrase had pricked Maria, something in the manager's tone, a suggestion that Carlos might have had some other hidden life. But she dismissed the thought. Carlos wasn't perfect, but she had never doubted his loyalty. The door to Valeria's room opened slightly. The girl walked to the kitchen without lifting her eyes. Her dark hair, gathered in a messy bun, hadn't seen a comb in a while. Are you going to the university today? Maria asked, trying to make contact. No, Valeria answered briefly, pouring herself coffee. I have the day off. It was a lie. Maria knew her daughter's schedule but didn't argue. Since that terrible day when they had received the call from the hospital, Valeria had become more distant, building a wall between herself and her mother. I think I'll sell your father's car, Maria said, watching for her daughter's reaction. Valeria froze, the cup paused halfway to her lips. Why? Her voice trembled, betraying the emotions hidden beneath her outward indifference. It's just sitting there, and we need the money. Maria tried to speak calmly, though everything inside her tightened at the necessity of discussing financial problems with her daughter. Maybe you just want to get rid of everything that reminds you of Dad? Valeria slammed the cup onto the table, coffee splashed onto the light tablecloth. How quickly you've decided to move on. It's not fair, Maria said quietly, feeling the lump rise in her throat. I don't want to get rid of the memories, we just need to move on somehow. Live however you want. Valeria turned and headed for the door. But don't touch his things. The front door slammed, and Maria was left alone again. Gabriella energetically stirred sugar into her coffee, watching her friend through large designer glasses. The colorful bracelets on her wrist jingled, her signature accessory, never removed. You look terrible, darling, she declared bluntly, snapping her fingers for emphasis, as she always did. Honestly, awful. The cafe with panoramic windows was filled with morning visitors. Outside, passers-by hurried by, life was going on as usual. Thanks for the compliment, Maria smiled weakly. Don't be sarcastic. Gabriella adjusted a bright red strand of hair. I'm selling Carlos's car, Maria said, getting to the point. Gabriella nodded decisively, the bracelets jingling again. Finally, a sensible idea. Why do you even need it? You can't drive. All right, I'll stop. I'll stop. She raised her hands, seeing the look on Maria's face. I can drive, Maria said firmly, remembering how she had always let Carlos take the wheel. It's just that Carlos always thought it was his duty to drive. And not just that you let him take the lead. Gabriella took a sip of coffee and raised an eyebrow meaningfully. Our generation's eternal problem, men who... Forget it, not the time for my lectures. When's the buyer coming to look at the car? She asked, tapping her long nails on the table. Tomorrow, Maria replied. I need to clear out Carlos's things from the glove compartment. Gabriella gave her friend a careful look. Do you want me to go with you? Otherwise, you'll keep putting it off forever, just like with your English lessons. That evening, Maria stood by the window for a long time, staring at her husband's car. There was an unspoken rule in their family. Carlos drove, and Maria sat beside him. She had only driven his car twice, when she was learning to drive and when Carlos hurt his hand 3 years ago. I can do this, Maria reassured herself. It's just a pile of metal, not part of Carlos. She opened the hallway closet and found the spare keys to the car, took a deep breath, and resolutely headed to the elevator. It was cool outside, with a light drizzle. Maria approached the car and ran her hand over the damp roof, then unlocked the doors and sat in the driver's seat. The smell. His smell, a mix of cologne, leather upholstery, and something unmistakably Carlos's, enveloped her immediately. Maria gripped the wheel, fighting the urge to jump out of the car and run. Her chest tightened, and her eyes stung. Calm down, she whispered. Just breathe. For a few minutes, she just sat there, getting used to the sensations, then opened the glove compartment. She needed to sort through its contents before the buyer arrived. Inside were ordinary things: an owner's manual, insurance documents, a pair of sunglasses, a phone charger. Maria methodically took everything out, placing it on the passenger seat. At the very back of the glove compartment, something gleamed. Maria reached in and felt a small object, a black flash drive, unmarked except for a small L sticker on one side. Strange, Maria thought, I've never seen this before. She turned the flash drive in her hands, wondering. Carlos was a very organized person. All his work materials were kept either on the home computer or in the cloud, carefully sorted into folders. What could be on this unfamiliar flash drive? Maria tucked the flash drive into her pocket, finished cleaning out the glove compartment, and returned to the apartment. Valeria hadn't come back yet. Maria stopped in the middle of the empty living room, listening to the heavy silence. Who am I now? Flashed through her mind. Not a wife, a widow. Even the word sounds different. The computer hummed quietly. Maria sat at the table, turning the flash drive between her fingers, a small black rectangle with a foreign letter L. Her heart began to race. Inserting the flash drive into the port meant crossing the final boundary of her husband's privacy. Carlos had always been clear about separating personal and shared space, never even telling her the passwords to his devices. But now I have no choice, Maria thought, taking a deep breath and resolutely plugging in the device. A window appeared on the screen with a single folder, no name, just an icon. Maria clicked on it. Dozens of files, emails, photos, documents with strange codes and numbers. Maria opened the first letter, dated 2 years ago, and froze when she saw the first line. Dear Carlos, thank you for agreeing to help. Lucia. Who is Lucia? In 14 years of marriage, Maria had never heard her husband mention this name. She opened the next letter, then another. With each message she read, her face grew paler and her hands colder. The husband she thought she knew inside out suddenly seemed like a completely different person, a person with a secret life of which Maria had no inkling. Maria heard the front door slam. Valeria was home. Mom, where are you? Came her daughter's voice from the hallway. But Maria didn't respond. She stood frozen in front of the monitor, unable to tear her gaze away from the photograph on the screen. A young woman with soft features was standing next to a small boy, and Carlos, smiling that special smile Maria had always believed was meant only for their family, had his arm around them. "Mom, why are you sitting in the dark?" Valeria flipped the light switch, and the room was suddenly flooded with bright light. Maria flinched and quickly closed the window on the monitor. Her hands were shaking, and her voice refused to obey. She gathered all her strength to sound normal. "I was just going through some documents." Valeria leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms over her chest. Her gaze briefly skimmed the computer, then returned to Maria. "Is something serious going on?" "You look strange," she observed. Maria ran her palm over her cheek, as if trying to wipe away all the emotions. "No, just tired." "Are you hungry?" "I can heat something up." "I already ate at Camila's," Valeria answered and turned to go to her room, but then stopped. "So, you decided to drive Dad's car?" Maria nodded, not trusting her voice. "Is the buyer coming tomorrow?" "Yes, by 11. Valeria was silent for a moment, then quietly said, without turning around, "You're rushing to erase him from our lives." Before Maria could reply, her daughter disappeared into her room. The door closed quietly, without the usual slam, and for some reason, that felt even worse. Maria waited until Valeria's footsteps faded and opened the file from the flash drive again. Her heart was pounding so loudly it seemed the sound should reverberate throughout the apartment. A folder with documents, a folder with photos, and the folder with the correspondence, the thickest one. Maria opened the first letter, dated almost 3 years ago. "Dear Carlos, thank you for agreeing to consider my case. I desperately need your help. Regards, Lucia Solano." The next letter was a week later. "Carlos, I understand the risks, but I have no choice. Diego needs treatment, and without documents, they won't admit us to the clinic. I'm ready to meet at any time convenient for you." With each message Maria read, her face became even paler. Lucia had fled from a war zone with her young son, without documents, money, or support. Carlos had helped her arrange some paperwork. "Carlos, I don't know how to thank you. Diego finally got the treatment. The doctor says everything will be fine." The correspondence became more frequent, and the tone more personal. "I'm glad I could help. Diego is a wonderful boy, very smart. It was such a joy to see you yesterday. Diego talked all evening about how you both flew a kite." Maria stared at the screen, and the letters blurred before her eyes. She opened the photo folder. Lucia, a young woman with tired but lively eyes, Diego, a blond boy about 6 or 7, and Carlos, smiling in a way Maria hadn't seen from him in a long time. More photos. A picnic in Chapultepec Park. Carlos teaching Diego how to ride a bike. Lucia blowing out candles on a cake. A birthday. Diego sleeping on Carlos's lap. They looked like a family. Maria abruptly closed the folder, unable to look further. Her hand instinctively reached for the phone. Gabriela, only she could know about this. "What happened?" her friend asked instead of a greeting. "Your voice scares me." "I found." Maria began but faltered, saying it aloud would make it real. Carlos had another woman and, it seems, another family. The line was silent for a second. "What?" Gabriela finally exclaimed. "Are you sure?" The flash drive in his car. Photos, letters, some Lucia with a child. "Oh, darling. Do you want me to come over?" "No." Maria quickly replied. "Valeria is home. I need to think. Don't do anything rash." Gabriela switched to her businesslike tone. "Who knows what's really going on? Could be relatives?" "Relatives?" Maria bitterly smirked. "The ones he's been hiding for years? And the documents? What kind of documents was he helping with?" Maria opened the third folder, files with strange codes, scanned certificates, forms. It looked like documents for a residence permit. There are a lot of files for different people. What? Gabriella's voice sounded surprised. Carlos was involved in forging documents? Looks like it, Maria whispered. There are dozens of names. All right, stop. Gabriella cut her off. This is a different and serious matter. Don't discuss it over the phone. Right now, the woman and the child are what matters. What's your plan? I don't know, Maria honestly replied. The person in the photos. I don't recognize him. And he was secretive too, Gabriella noted. Try to sleep. We'll meet tomorrow. After the call, Maria sat in the dark for a long time. Sleep didn't come. Her mind was spinning with fragments of phrases from the letters, smiles from the photos, and strange hints from the bank manager. In the morning, the car buyer called and postponed the meeting until tomorrow. Maria felt relieved. She needed time. Valeria left early, leaving behind an untouched cup of coffee and a half-eaten toast, an unusual forgetfulness for her daughter. Maria sat back at the computer. Now that the initial shock had passed, she could think more clearly. Carlos had helped refugees with documents, that was a fact. Among them was Lucia with her child, with whom it seemed he had developed a personal relationship. But had she been the cause of their financial problems? Maria opened the bank statements, regular transfers to the same account, small amounts twice a month, but over the years, they had added up to a significant sum. The recipient was only listed by the initials LS Lucia? Probably. Maria felt a sharp wave of anger. All these years, while she saved and put aside money for their daughter's education, Carlos had secretly been supporting another woman and child. And if this was his child? The thought pierced her mind. She went back to the photos, scrutinizing the boy's face, blonde hair, a button nose, distinctive eyes. At 6 to 7 years old, Valeria had looked very similar. Maria covered her face with her hands. Tears, which hadn't come since the funeral, flooded out. She cried from hurt, from anger, from confusion. Who was he really, and who was she, a woman who had spent 14 years with a stranger? When the tears finally stopped, Maria made a decision. She had to find out the truth, all of it. In the folder with the documents, she found a file with an address, a street, a house, an apartment in the area of Naucalpan, far from their neighborhood. Maria wrote down the address, got dressed, and resolutely headed for the door. The drive took almost an hour. The neighborhood turned out to be a typical urban outskirts, high-rise buildings, playgrounds with peeling paint, shops with flashy signs. Maria parked across from the house listed in the address and waited. She didn't know exactly what she was waiting for. To see Lucia? To talk to her? About what? Hello. I'm the widow of the man you might have had an affair with. Later in the evening, a taxi stopped in front of the building. A young woman with shopping bags from Soriana supermarket got out. Even from a distance, Maria recognized her, Lucia from the photo, slightly thinner, with her hair pulled into a ponytail, but unmistakably her. Maria's heart began to race. She wanted to get out of the car, call to the woman, but her body refused to obey. She could only watch as Lucia entered the building and disappeared behind the door. Next time, Maria thought, starting the engine, I won't be ready. But fate had other plans. When she returned home, Maria found Valeria at her computer. The monitor was lit up with Lucia's open letters. What is this? Her daughter's voice rang with tension. Who is this woman, and why is Dad writing her such things? Maria froze in the doorway, unsure of how to answer. The truth, the one she had stumbled upon a few hours ago, now stood before her daughter in all its ugliness. Valeria, listen. No. Valeria jumped up, clenching her fists. You listen. You've always been unfair to Dad, and now, when he's gone, you're tarnishing his memory with this filth. I don't. Maria began, but her daughter wouldn't let her finish. I don't believe it. I don't believe Dad could have cheated. This is some mistake or forgery. You made it all up to justify selling his things. Valeria's face twisted, her eyes filled with tears. She shoved her mother away and ran to her room, slamming the door so hard the walls trembled. Maria slowly sank into the chair in front of the computer. On the screen was one of the last letters from Carlos to Lucia. "My dear, I can't wait for our next meeting. I miss you and Diego every day." Maria closed the file and turned off the computer. Tomorrow she would go to Lucia and face the truth. The morning greeted Maria with a headache and a heaviness in her shoulders. She had barely slept, replaying the scenes of last night's argument with Valeria and imagining the upcoming conversation with Lucia. Valeria hadn't left her room in the evening. Maria had approached the door several times, listening, even knocking softly, but her daughter didn't respond. Only by the rustling and muffled sobs did Maria understand that Valeria wasn't sleeping. Now the door to her daughter's room was ajar. Maria peeked inside. It was empty. On the neatly made bed was a note: "I'm going to Grandma's for a couple of days. Don't call." Maria sighed. To her mother-in-law. Her relationship with Carlos's mother had never been good. Dolores had always believed that her son had chosen the wrong wife, a simple teacher instead of someone more appropriate. Maybe it's for the best, Maria thought. Today, she wouldn't have been able to give her any attention. She dressed with extra care, as if preparing for an important interview. In a way, it was carefully chosen makeup, a formal dress, hair neatly done, armor that was supposed to protect her from humiliation when meeting her husband's mistress. Was she a mistress? This question gnawed at her. Judging by the letters, Carlos and Lucia had a close relationship. But had they been lovers in the literal sense, or had Carlos's help been motivated by compassion for a woman in need? And Diego, could he be Carlos's son? Maria shook her head, pushing the intrusive thoughts aside. Too many questions, but today she would get answers. The journey to the Naucalpan district seemed endless. Maria looked out the minibus window, watching the city change, from the well-maintained center to the shabby high-rises of working-class neighborhoods. Why had Carlos spent so much time here? He had never mentioned even visiting this part of the city. Questions multiplied with each passing minute. The more Maria thought about it, the more she realized how little she knew about her husband's inner life. When she arrived at the stop, she checked the address she had written down. Lucia's house was only 300 meters away. The wind rustled the leaves on the trees, loud music played somewhere, and a group of teenagers laughed noisily at a playground. A normal day, a normal life for everyone but her. Maria took a deep breath, gathering her courage, and headed toward the high-rise building, second entrance, 7th floor, apartment 208. She couldn't remember the last time her heart had raced this much. The elevator moved slowly, creaking with effort. Maria examined her reflection in the cloudy mirror of the elevator, a pale face, a fixed stare, a stranger's face. "Who are you now, Maria?" She silently asked her reflection. The elevator doors opened on the 7th floor. Apartment 208 was the third door from the elevator, an ordinary white door with a peephole. Maria froze in front of it for a few seconds, then decisively pressed the doorbell. Silence. She pressed it again. Footsteps were heard from inside, followed by a child's voice. "Who's there?" Maria's voice trembled. "I'm looking for Lucia." The lock clicked, the door slowly opened. On the threshold stood a light-haired boy of about 7 or 8. He looked at the unfamiliar woman curiously. "Mom will be here soon." "She ran to get bread," he said. "Come in, wait for her." Maria blinked, unable to say a word. There was no doubt now, the boy looked incredibly similar to Carlos, the same light hair, the same eye shape, even the dimples in his cheeks when he smiled, just like Valeria at that age. "Is something wrong with Mom?" The boy noticed her strange gaze. "Are you from her work?" "No," Maria swallowed the lump in her throat. "I'm just an acquaintance." "Diego?" "Yes," the boy nodded, raising an eyebrow in surprise. "How do you know my name?" Maria was taken aback. She hadn't planned for this part. What was she doing in someone else's apartment, talking to a child who might Uncle Carlos told me, she answered, choosing the simplest explanation. I'm an acquaintance of his. The boy's face brightened. You know Uncle Carlos? When will he be here? He promised to take me to the amusement park. But then Mom said he went far away. Maria's breath caught. Uncle Carlos, not Dad, and it seemed the boy didn't know Carlos was dead. Yes, he. Maria started, unsure of what to say. Diego, who's there? A woman's voice came from the hallway, and Lucia entered with a shopping bag. Upon seeing the stranger, she froze in place. The bag slipped from her hands, mangoes and avocados spilled onto the floor. Oh, I'll help, Diego exclaimed, rushing to gather the fruits. Lucia didn't pay attention to the spilled produce. She was staring at Maria with wide eyes, and in that gaze, there was genuine fear. You, she whispered. You're Maria? Maria felt the ground slip from under her feet. Lucia knew who she was. Yes, she answered, struggling to keep her composure. We need to talk. Lucia quickly shifted her gaze to her son. Diego, dear, go play in your room. Aunt Maria and I need to talk. The boy clearly wanted to protest, but something in his mother's voice made him obey. He cast one last curious look at Maria and disappeared behind the door to his room. Lucia led Maria to the kitchen, small but cozy, with floral curtains and children's drawings on the fridge. There was a cup with unfinished coffee on the table, and an open English textbook. Please sit, Lucia gestured to a chair. I knew this day would come, but I didn't think it would be so soon. Maria sat down, feeling her knees tremble. You knew about me? Lucia nodded, looking down. Carlos never hid that he was married. From the very beginning, I knew he had a wife and daughter. And I didn't know you existed. Maria's voice was muffled. And Diego. At the mention of her son, Lucia tensed. Listen, I understand what you're feeling, but between us, things aren't exactly as you. Diego is Carlos's son? Maria interrupted her. This question tormented her the most. Lucia stared at her for a long time, then slowly nodded. Yes. One short word, like a verdict. Maria felt like she was choking. How old is he? 8. He'll be 9 soon. Maria quickly calculated. 9 years ago, she and Carlos had already been married for 5 years. Valeria was 8. Maria swallowed hard. How did it happen? Lucia sighed. It's a long story. I was working for a company that helped migrants with their documents, legally, she quickly added. Carlos was one of our clients. Not for himself, he was helping his friend from Venezuela get refugee status. We met, started talking. Lucia stopped, clearly leaving out some details. Anyway, we had a brief affair. When I found out I was pregnant, I immediately told him. He was shocked, said he had a family, a daughter, and couldn't leave everything. Maria listened, squinting her eyes, as if trying to lessen the pain from every word. I didn't ask him to leave you, Lucia continued. I said I would manage on my own. He suggested I get an abortion. Her voice trembled. I refused. We parted ways. And then? Maria asked, opening her eyes. Then I had Diego, raised him alone. And 3 years ago, the war started in my hometown in Colombia. My documents, there were problems with them. I was facing deportation with Diego. I was desperate and decided to find Carlos. I knew he worked at a bank, held a good position. I thought maybe he could help with legalizing me, at least for my son's sake. Lucia stood up, poured herself a glass of water, and took a sip. He helped me at first only with the documents, then Diego got sick and needed expensive treatment. Carlos started helping financially, and then he wanted to see his son. At first, he just asked about him, then he started visiting. And then you became lovers again, Maria finished the thought. To her surprise, Lucia shook her head. No, not in the way you're thinking. There was closeness between us, yes, but not physical. He was attached to Diego and, I think, to me as well, but he never, she emphasized the word, never promised to leave you. Maria looked at her distrustfully. I saw the letters. My dear, I miss you every day. Lucia smiled faintly. Carlos was a complex person. I think he loved us both, in different ways, you as his wife, the mother of his daughter, part of his official life, me as a reminder of another, freer life he could have had. And Diego, of course, she paused. You know, he often said that Diego looked very much like Valeria at that age. He showed me pictures. Maria flushed. He showed you pictures of our daughter? Yes, Lucia simply replied. He was proud of her, said she was very talented and stubborn, just like her mother. Maria didn't know what to say. Everything felt so tangled, so wrong, one life, divided into two parts, two homes, two women, two children. What about the others? She asked. I saw the files. He helped many people with their documents. Lucia nodded, and there was a hint of pride in her gaze. Yes. When I told him about my problems, about how difficult it was for refugees to get legal status, he got excited about the idea. At first, he only helped with advice, using his connections, but then he started doing more. Over the last 2 years, he helped dozens of people. What he did was illegal. It's a criminal offense. Maria pointed out. He helped people who had nowhere else to go. Lucia's voice grew bitter. Families with children, running from war, women who could end up on the streets. Yes, technically it was illegal, but morally. She didn't finish the sentence. There was no need. A heavy silence hung in the room. Two women, so different and yet so alike, avoided looking at each other. Do you know he died from an aneurysm? Maria finally asked. Lucia nodded, her eyes filled with tears. Yes. He complained of headaches for the last few months. I urged him to see a doctor, but he kept putting it off. He worked too much, he was stressed. Why didn't you come to the funeral? The question escaped Maria unexpectedly, even to herself. Lucia looked at her, surprised. How could I? It would have been wrong toward you, toward Valeria. Maria suddenly felt a strange gratitude for this woman. Despite everything, Lucia had shown a tact that many lacked. From the children's room, there was the sound of something falling, followed by Diego's voice. Mom, can I come out now? Just a little more, sweetheart. Lucia replied. Then she turned to Maria. What will you do now? Good question. Maria didn't know the answer herself. I don't know, she admitted honestly. I came here thinking I hated you, that you destroyed my family, stole my husband. But now you see that I'm as much a victim of circumstances as you are. Maria shook her head. I don't know, really, I don't know. I need to process everything. She stood up, ready to leave, but stopped at the door, remembering one more important question. Carlos left debts, significant ones. The bank hinted that he had some personal expenses. Lucia looked genuinely surprised. Debts? He never. I thought his finances were in order. The money he gave us with Diego was small, regular amounts. I didn't think he borrowed any money. They both fell silent, realizing that there was another unknown layer to the story. Maybe that money was for his activities, Lucia suggested. The document processing, bribes to officials. That made sense. Carlos had probably spent significant amounts on his underground charity work, unwilling to touch the family budget. Probably, Maria agreed. Too many secrets for one person. She opened the door but turned around at the last moment. Lucia, thank you for your honesty. Lucia smiled faintly. Carlos always said you were strong, stronger than you think. These words echoed in Maria's head the whole way home. The apartment greeted her with emptiness and silence. Valeria didn't come back, and Maria didn't expect her to. She needed time to process everything she had learned today. She went to Carlos' office. This room had always felt like forbidden territory. Her husband had hated it when she touched or moved anything in there. Now Maria understood why. She sat at his desk, turned on the computer. She knew the password, Valeria's birthday. To her surprise, the password worked. There were only a few folders on the desktop, all with neutral titles: work, documents, photos. Maria began to systematically review their contents. In the work folder, she found ordinary bank documents, presentations, and spreadsheets, nothing suspicious. In the documents folder, there were bills, receipts, insurance papers, again, nothing unusual. But the last folder, photos, was more interesting. It contained subfolders with family photos sorted by year. Maria opened one of them, their vacation in Cancun 3 years ago, a smiling Carlos hugging her and Valeria against the backdrop of a sunset. A happy family, an idyllic life. Now it all seemed like a lie. She was about to close the folder when her gaze caught a subfolder with the unassuming name Arch. Upon opening it, Maria discovered dozens of files with documents, passports, birth certificates, work permits, all flawlessly forged. Now, Maria saw it clearly. Behind each document was someone's fate, someone's desperate hope for a better life. And Carlos had been helping these people, breaking the law, risking his freedom, his reputation, and his family's well-being, but helping other families survive. Another side of the husband she, it seemed, hadn't known at all. Suddenly, Maria heard the sound of the front door. Quickly slamming the laptop shut, she peeked into the hallway. Valeria stood at the door, pale, with tear-streaked eyes. "Are you going through Dad's things?" she asked challengingly, noticing her mother standing in the doorway of the study. Maria straightened up. "Yes, and I think you should go through them too." "To find more dirt about him?" "No, thanks." "Valeria, listen." Maria took a step toward her daughter, but she recoiled. "I met with Lucia today." Valeria froze. "That woman from the letters?" "Why?" "To find out the truth, the whole truth. And I think you should know it too." "I don't want to know anything." Valeria shouted. "I don't want to hear that Dad was some cheater, a liar." "It's not just about that," Maria replied calmly. "Your father did a lot of ambiguous things. Some of them were illegal, but many were noble." Valeria looked at her mother with disbelief. "What do you mean?" Maria sighed. This conversation had to happen sooner or later. It's better now, as all the cards are slowly being revealed. Lucia has a son, his name is Diego, he's 8 years old, and he's your brother, Valeria. Your half-brother. Your father's son. Valeria's face twisted as though she had been struck. She turned even paler, swayed, and grabbed the wall to keep herself from falling. "No," she whispered. "No, that's not true." "I saw him today," Maria continued softly. "He looks a lot like you, the same light hair, the same dimples on his cheeks when he smiles." Valeria covered her ears with her hands, as if she could physically block out the words. "Stop. I don't want to hear this." She rushed into her room, slamming the door loudly. Then there was the sound of drawers being opened and things rustling. Maria wearily sank into a chair in the hallway. She understood that Valeria needed time to accept this new reality. She herself needed time as well. Half an hour later, the door to Valeria's room opened. The girl emerged with a backpack in her hands. "I'm going to stay with Abuela," she said curtly. "I don't know for how long." "Don't call me Valeria." Maria stood up, trying to hold her daughter back. "Please, let's talk. We'll figure this out together." "There's nothing to figure out," the girl snapped. "You've always hated Dad, always criticized him, always complained. And now you're happy that you found some dirt on him to justify yourself." Those words hurt Maria more than everything she had learned about her husband. "It's not true, and you know it," she said quietly. "I don't know anything," Valeria bitterly replied. "Not about you, not about Dad. Everything I thought was real turned out to be a lie." With those words, she left the apartment. Maria stood in the hallway for a long time, unable to move. Then, slowly, she returned to Carlos's study, sat at the computer, and opened the folder with documents. She began to methodically go through each file, each record, trying to piece together a complete picture of the life of the man who had slept next to her for so many years but had remained a stranger. In the bottom drawer of the desk, she found a thick envelope, sealed and signed with her name. Carlos's handwriting, confident, with a slight rightward slant. Maria stared at the envelope for a long time, hesitant to open it. Finally, gathering her courage, she carefully tore the edge. Inside was a letter written on official bank stationery. "Dear Maria," it began. "If you're reading this letter, then something has gone wrong." Maria held the letter with trembling hands. Carlos's handwriting was so familiar, with its characteristic slant. She had always joked that you could tell his ambition to always move forward by his handwriting. Now, that joke seemed like bitter irony. "Dear Maria, if you're reading this letter, then something has gone wrong. Maybe I'm no longer here, or the truth has come out in some other way. I'll start with the most important. I've always loved you, even when I did things that are hard to believe. You were and still are the most important person in my life, along with Valeria. But I must confess everything. Several years ago, I made a mistake. I had a son with another woman. Her name is Lucia. She's a refugee from Colombia. When I found out about the child, I had already come back to you. We were happy again after that difficult period in our relationship. I couldn't destroy everything. I couldn't hurt you and Valeria like that, so I decided to forget about it. I convinced myself that it would be better for everyone. I supported Lucia and the child financially, but I didn't participate in their lives. Then, 3 years ago, Lucia came back. Her son, my son, was sick. She was facing deportation. I couldn't turn away. I started helping them, first just with money and connections, then I got deeper into it. I became part of a network helping desperate people like Lucia, refugees without documents, families in hopeless situations. What I did was illegal: document forgery, bribes to officials. If this comes out, there could be serious consequences. I risked not only my freedom but the well-being of our family. There's no excuse for it. In the last few weeks, I've been feeling worse, constant headaches, weakness. I did an exam secretly from you. The diagnosis is not good, an aneurysm in the brain vessels. The doctors say surgery is needed, but there are many risks. Before the surgery, I wanted to tell you everything about Lucia and Diego, about my underground activities. I was going to do it after Valeria's birthday, so as not to spoil the celebration. I don't even know if I'll have the courage. If something happens to me, please take care of them. Not Lucia, she's strong, she'll manage, but Diego, he's innocent. And also, protect Valeria from any problems that might come from my actions. All the documents that could compromise me are in the bank vault. The key is in the right drawer of the desk, in the box with the cufflinks. Forgive me, if you can. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I still hope for it. Always yours, Carlos. Maria set the letter down on her lap. Tears ran down her cheeks, but she barely noticed them. Everything fell into place, and yet it all came crashing down at once. Carlos's double life, his sudden illness, his secrecy in the last few months. The letter was dated 3 weeks before his death. He never found the courage to tell the truth, although he had planned to. Didn't he have enough time, or was it a matter of courage? Maria stood up, walked to the desk, and opened the right drawer. The cufflink box, a small wooden box she had given Carlos for their 5th wedding anniversary. Inside, under the velvet cushion, was indeed the key, with a tag marking the vault number and the branch address. Tomorrow, she would go to the bank and retrieve the documents, but today she needed to decide what to do with Valeria. Her mother-in-law's house had always evoked mixed feelings in Maria: large, well-maintained, with a perfect garden, yet utterly uncomfortable, just like Dolores herself, flawless on the outside, cold on the inside. Maria rang the doorbell, nervously fixing her hair. She hadn't warned of her visit. She had called Valeria, but she hadn't answered. The housekeeper opened the door and led her to the living room. Dolores sat in an embroidered chair, a needlework in her hands, impeccable posture, perfect haircut, expensive but restrained dress. Maria, she didn't even stand up. What a surprise! Hello, Dona Dolores, I came for Valeria. The mother-in-law put down the needlework. Valeria doesn't want to talk to you. She's very upset. I know, Maria took a deep breath. But she needs to hear the whole truth. The truth? Dolores's eyebrows arched. About my son supposedly having some affair? Valeria told me about this fantasy of yours. It's not a fantasy. Maria replied firmly. Carlos had a son from another woman. The boy is 8 years old, and his name is Diego. I met his mother, I saw the boy, there's no doubt about the resemblance. Dolores turned pale, and for the first time, true emotions appeared on her face. This is impossible, she whispered. Carlos would never. I thought the same. Maria pulled a photo from her bag that she had printed from a flash drive. Take a look for yourself. Dolores slowly put on her glasses, took the photo, and stared at the image of her son with Lucia and Diego. My God, she gasped. He looks so much like Carlos when he was a child. Yes, Maria nodded. And he also looks like Valeria. Dolores handed the photo back, took off her glasses, her hands were visibly trembling. Why did you come? To gloat? To show that my son wasn't as flawless as I thought? No, Maria replied wearily, I came because Valeria deserves to know the truth, all of the truth about her father, about her brother, and because... She hesitated, because Carlos would have wanted us to be one family, no matter what. Did you find any letters? Dolores leaned forward. Did he leave something behind? Yes, Maria nodded. A letter for me. He wrote it shortly before his death, already knowing about his illness. Dolores' face grew even more drawn. He knew, she whispered. And didn't tell me? He didn't tell anyone, Maria softly replied. He didn't want to worry us. A silence fell. Then, Dolores unexpectedly began crying, deeply, quietly, but with such rawness that Maria's heart ached. This strong, proud woman, who had never shown weakness, now looked completely broken. He was always like this, she said through tears. Never shared his problems. Since childhood, I can handle it, Mom, always I can handle it, even when he was in pain and scared. I thought I knew him well, but it turns out I didn't know him at all. Maria awkwardly touched her mother-in-law's hand. I think none of us truly knew him. Dolores lifted her reddened eyes to her. He loved you, you know, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Even when you were going through that difficult time before his business trip to Guadalajara, he always said that you were the best thing that ever happened to him. Maria felt a lump rise in her throat. How ironic, hearing these words from a woman who had always made it clear that her daughter-in-law was not good enough for her son. Thank you, was all she could say. Valeria is in the garden, Dolores suddenly said, wiping her tears. Go to her. She should hear the truth from you, not from me. Valeria was sitting on a bench among the roses, wearing headphones, drawing in a sketchbook, the only activity that always calmed her down. When she saw her mother, she deliberately turned away. Maria sat down next to her and gently touched her daughter's shoulder. Valeria flinched and pulled off her headphones. I asked you not to come. I found a letter from Dad, Maria said quietly. He wrote it shortly before he died. I think you should read it. She handed her the envelope. Valeria stared at it for a long time, reluctant to take it. Is it true? About the woman? About the child? Yes, Maria nodded. But there's much more, about his feelings for us, why he never told the truth. Valeria finally took the letter, opened it, and began reading. As she read, her face changed, from disbelief to shock, from shock to deep sorrow. When she finished, she looked up at her mother with tear-filled eyes. Was he really sick? Did he know he might die? It seems so, Maria replied. An aneurysm, it's a dangerous condition. The doctors probably warned him of the risks. And you wanted to tell us everything, Valeria whispered, after my birthday. Yes, Maria hugged her daughter's shoulders. He didn't want to hide it forever, he just didn't have time. Valeria buried her face in her mother's shoulder and sobbed loudly, without holding back, more than she had even at the funeral. Maria held her tightly, stroking her back, letting her release all the pent-up emotions. I'm so angry at him, Valeria said through her tears. And I miss him so much. I know, darling, I know, Maria answered. They sat there for a long time, holding each other under the rustling leaves and the faint scent of wilting roses. And what's he like, this boy? Valeria suddenly asked, a little calmer. My Diego? Maria smiled, though her eyes were still wet. He's nice, blonde, just like you were at his age. Open, friendly, loves to draw. His whole apartment with Lucia is covered in his drawings. Does he know about Dad? Valeria pulled away, wiping her tears. He knows that Carlos was an important person to him. But it seems he doesn't know that he's gone. Lucia told him that Dad went far away. I'd like to meet him, she said quietly. Can I? Maria wasn't expecting these words. She looked at her daughter with surprise and sudden pride. Of course, if you really want to. I can arrange it with Lucia. I want to. Valeria answered firmly. If he really is my brother, then I think Dad would have wanted us to know about each other. Maria hugged her daughter even tighter. I'm proud of you. Do you know that? Valeria gave a faint smile. Because I want to meet the boy whose existence shattered my view of our family? Because you're wiser than I was at your age, Maria replied seriously. Because you see what matters, and don't hold on to grudges. I don't know, Valeria sighed. I'm still so angry at Dad, and at you too, for throwing all this at me. I understand, Maria nodded. And I'm sorry for that. I was in shock too, I didn't know what the best way was to handle it. Valeria looked at her mother more intently, as though seeing her for the first time, not as the all-knowing parent, but as a person as confused as herself. Let's go home, Maria suggested. Tomorrow we need to go to the bank to pick up the documents from the safe, and then we'll decide what to do next. Valeria nodded. We need to say goodbye to Abuela. They returned to the house. Dolores was waiting for them in the living room, already gathered, with her usual unreadable expression. Only her reddened eyes betrayed her emotional state. Leaving? She asked. Yes, Abuela. Valeria walked over and awkwardly hugged her. But I'll come by this weekend, I promise. Dolores looked at Maria over her granddaughter's head with surprise. Maria smiled weakly. For the first time in 14 years, there was something resembling mutual understanding between them. At home, Valeria immediately went to her room, saying she wanted to be alone. Maria didn't object. They both needed time to process everything that had happened. She sat in the armchair in the living room, staring absently at the family photos on the wall. Happy moments, frozen in time. Were they real? Or even then, had Carlos already been living his double life? Her phone rang. It was Gabriella's number. Hello. Maria answered. Sorry I didn't call back. I was about to come over with the police. Her friend's voice held genuine concern. How are you? What's going on? Maria briefly recounted the events of the past few days, the meeting with Lucia, discovering the letter, and reconciling with Valeria. And what now? Gabriella asked. What are your plans? I don't know, Maria answered honestly. Tomorrow I'm going to pick up the documents from the bank vault, see what's in there. I need to understand if there's any risk for Valeria and me. And Lucia? What are you going to do with her? Maria paused. What did she really feel about Lucia? It wasn't hate anymore, that much was certain. Rather, a strange solidarity. They had both loved the same man, both been deceived by him, and now they both had to move on. Nothing bad, if that's what you mean, she finally answered. Valeria wants to meet Diego. I think it's the right thing to do. Wow. Gabriella whistled. You're surprising me, my friend. If I were you. What? Maria asked when Gabriella went quiet. I don't know, Gabriella answered honestly. I'd probably do the same. What's the point of being angry at them? They're both victims of circumstances. Maria smiled. Gabriella always managed to surprise her with her insight, hidden behind a mask of irreverence. Listen, her friend suddenly suggested, do you want me to come over with a bottle of wine? We can sit, talk. You shouldn't be alone tonight. No, thanks, Maria gently declined. Valeria is home. She's not ready for guests, and I need some time alone with my thoughts. Okay, Gabriella agreed. But if you need anything, call me anytime. After the conversation, Maria sat in silence in the living room, thinking about her upcoming visit to the bank. What could be in that vault? How serious were the matters Carlos had gotten involved in? And how could she protect Valeria from the possible consequences? She got up and went to the window. It was already dark outside, and the streetlights had turned on. An ordinary street, ordinary houses, ordinary people. How many of them, she wondered, lived double lives, hiding secrets from those closest to them? She knocked on Valeria's room, and the girl peeked out into the hallway. Mom, are you going to cook? I'm hungry. Maria smiled, almost a daily question, almost a normal life. Of course, I'll make something now. Maybe they could make it. Maybe they could rebuild something new from the pieces of their old life, something not as perfect as before, but real. The next morning, Maria went to the bank. Valeria wanted to go with her, but Maria insisted that her daughter stay home, just in case. Who knew what might be in those documents? The bank officer checked Maria's papers, confirmed her right to access the vault as the heir, and led her to the special room. Do you need time to go through the contents? He asked. Yes, if possible, Maria replied. Of course. I'll leave you, but I'll be nearby. Just press the call button when you're finished. Left alone, Maria inserted the key into the vault and turned it. Inside, she found a thick folder of documents, several flash drives, and a sealed envelope marked VM. Valeria's initials. Maria opened the folder. As she had suspected, there were copies of forged documents, bank statements, names, and contacts of people Carlos had helped, dozens, if not hundreds, of families with children from conflict zones. She flipped through the papers. If these documents fell into the hands of law enforcement, Carlos would face serious punishment. But he was already gone. What about those left behind? The people who had used these documents, and her and Valeria, who were formally uninvolved but financially tied to this activity. Maria closed the folder and took the envelope for Valeria. She wanted to open it but hesitated. Whatever was inside, it was a personal letter from her father to his daughter. She thought for a moment. Destroy the documents? Keep them as evidence that her husband tried to help people, not just spend money on his mistress? Or give them to someone who could continue his work? The last thought made her freeze. Continue his work? Seriously? She was a foreign language teacher, someone who had never even broken a traffic law, and now she was thinking about illegal activity. But something about this idea stuck with her, not the illegality itself, but the meaning, helping those who had nowhere else to turn, being the last hope for the desperate. Maria carefully placed everything back into the vault and pressed the call button. Now, she needed to focus on something else, the reunification of what remained of their family. Stepping out of the bank, she dialed the number she had written down yesterday before leaving Lucia's. Hello, a woman's voice answered cautiously. Lucia, it's Maria. My daughter wants to meet Diego. Is that possible? There was a pause on the other end. Yes, Lucia finally answered. Of course, Diego would like that too. He often asks about Uncle Carlos's other children. When would you like to come? Maybe today? Maria suggested. Around 5 o'clock. Okay, Lucia agreed. We'll be waiting. After the call, Maria stood on the bank steps for a while, watching the cars pass by. A strange sense of peace washed over her for the first time in weeks since her husband's death. It was as if the burden she had been carrying all this time wasn't his death or the financial problems, but his undisclosed secrets. Now that the truth had come to light, she could finally start over, not as before, not the same, but without lies, without double lives, without the shadows of the past following every step. She suddenly remembered one of her last conversations with Carlos. He had looked tired and distracted. She asked if everything was okay. "I've just been thinking a lot lately," he had said. "About what really matters, about what will remain after we're gone." Now she understood what he had meant. Maria walked down the steps and headed to the bus stop. She was about to have a difficult conversation with Valeria, and then an even more difficult meeting between the two halves of Carlos's family, the official and the secret, the two parts of his life that he had never managed to unite. But maybe, just maybe, she could do it. "Mom, how do I look?" Valeria nervously adjusted her hair in the hallway mirror. Maria smiled as she looked at her daughter. Today, Valeria reminded her of Carlos more than ever, the same determined glint in her eyes, the same stubborn shoulder forward when she was anxious. "You look great," Maria replied. "But you didn't have to dress up like this. It's just meeting my half-brother, whose existence I found out about 3 days ago." "Yes, I remember." There was nervousness in her voice, but not anger, progress. "It doesn't all have to work out right away," Maria said gently. "This is just the first meeting, and you'll have time." "I know," Valeria took a deep breath. "I just want it to go well for Dad." "And for yourself," Maria added. "You're not obligated to force yourself to love this boy just because he's your brother. Give yourself time to understand how you really feel." "And you?" Valeria suddenly asked, looking at her mother in the mirror. "How do you really feel about meeting them? Are you really ready?" Maria hesitated. She could lie, give the usual line about accepting the situation, but Valeria deserved honesty. "Honestly, I don't know," she replied quietly. "Part of me is still angry at Dad, at Lucia, at this whole situation. Part of me is scared of meeting them, but another part understands that they are also victims of circumstances, and Diego is definitely not to blame for anything." Valeria nodded as if this was exactly the answer she had expected. "Then let's go, and we'll sort it out there." They went downstairs and got into a taxi. For the whole ride to Lucia's house, Valeria stayed silent, tightly holding a small package, a gift for Diego. Maria didn't ask what was inside. It was a personal gesture from her daughter, her own decision. Lucia opened the door immediately, as if she had been waiting behind it. She looked as anxious as Valeria, pale, with a nervous smile, wearing a neat but modest dress. "Hello," she stepped back to let them into the apartment. "Please, come in." An awkward pause hung between the women. They had met before, on the day Maria came seeking the truth. But that conversation had been focused on Carlos. Now, they were about to interact directly with each other without the presence of the man. The apartment looked different from when Maria had visited last. It was clean and tidy, with a vase of flowers on the table, fresh curtains on the windows. It was clear that Lucia had prepared for this meeting and considered it important. "And where?" Valeria began, looking around. "Diego is in his room," Lucia explained. "He's a little nervous. I told him that a special guest, his sister, would be coming today." She said the last word with hesitation, as if tasting it. "And how did he react?" Maria asked, with barely concealed tension in her voice. "He asked a million questions," Lucia smiled faintly. "Why didn't he know before? Why hadn't his sister come? Does she look like him? And did you tell him that his father died?" Valeria asked quietly. Lucia shook her head, avoiding looking at Maria. "No, not yet. I wanted to talk to you about it first," she hesitated, choosing her words. You see, Diego doesn't know that Carlos was his father. He thought of him as just a close friend, although he was very attached to him. If I tell him that Carlos was his dad and also that he's gone, I'm afraid it'll be too much for the child. Valeria frowned, processing the information. So I can't call him my brother? You can. Lucia quickly answered. I explained that Carlos had a daughter, and now she wants to meet Diego. He understands that you're somehow connected. We can just introduce the full information gradually when he's ready. Maria felt irritation rising inside her again, more half-truths, more omissions. Wasn't this exactly why they were all in this situation? And when do you think he'll be ready? She asked more sharply than she intended. Are you making the same mistake Carlos did by delaying the difficult conversation? Lucia blushed. It's not the same, she replied quietly but firmly. Carlos hid the truth from you, the adults. I'm just protecting the child from information that might be too much for him to handle. Diego is a very sensitive boy. Mom, Valeria put her hand on Maria's shoulder. Lucia is right. Let's just meet today, we can figure out the rest later. Maria took a deep breath, forcing herself to calm down. Valeria was right. It wasn't a good idea to start things off with conflict, especially when the child's well-being was at stake. Okay, she agreed. Let's do it that way. Lucia nodded in relief and headed toward the children's room, but the door opened before she could reach it. Standing in the doorway was Diego, a fair-haired boy in a neat shirt and jeans, with curious blue eyes. He shifted nervously from one foot to the other, studying the guests. Hello, he said. Your Aunt Maria. I remember you. Then he turned his gaze to Valeria and froze, his eyes wide open. And you're Valeria? Mom said you're my sister. Valeria smiled awkwardly. Yes, I'm Valeria. Hi, Diego. The boy stepped closer, examining her face intently. Is it true that you also draw? Mom said you draw well. Yes, Valeria nodded. I study at the art university. Cool. His face lit up. Can I see your drawings? Of course. Valeria took out her phone. I have photos of some of my works. The ice was broken. Maria and Lucia exchanged a look, this time with some relief, though the tension between them had not completely dissipated. Valeria and Diego settled on the couch next to each other, eagerly scrolling through the gallery on the phone. Let's have some coffee, Lucia suggested after a pause. I made flan. Maria followed her to the kitchen, noticing how uncomfortable they both seemed. While Lucia worked with the coffee machine, Maria examined the children's drawings stuck to the refrigerator with magnets. He really has talent, she remarked, trying to start a casual conversation. Like Valeria did at his age? Carlos used to say the same thing, Lucia replied quietly, not turning around. It must be genetics. A heavy silence fell. Mentioning Carlos, comparing the children, it all seemed to underscore the unnaturalness of their situation. Lucia, Maria decided to break the silence. I'd like to discuss something with you regarding finances. Lucia tensed, her back straightened. I never asked Carlos for money, he insisted on helping Diego. I'm not planning to ask you for any. I know, Maria interrupted her. It's not about that. Carlos left debts, that's true, but after his death, I'm entitled to an insurance payout, a significant amount. I think it's right for part of that money to go toward Diego's education. Lucia quickly turned to face her, something like resentment flashing in her eyes. What? No, I can't accept that. We don't need charity. It's not charity, Maria replied, feeling irritation rise in her throat. It's for Diego, for Carlos's son. I'm sure he would want this. I can provide for my son myself, Lucia said stubbornly. I've managed all this time, and I'll keep managing. It's not about whether you can or not. Maria tried to stay calm, though everything inside her was boiling. Why was this woman rejecting the hand of help that was so difficult for Maria to extend? It's about Diego having a right to part of his father's inheritance, just like Valeria. Lucia was silent, clearly struggling with conflicting feelings. Listen, Maria softened her tone, I understand your pride, but this isn't about us. It's about the boy's future. Do you really want to deny him opportunities because of your principles? It wasn't the most tactful approach, but it worked. Lucia slowly sank into a chair, her shoulders slumping. It's all so complicated, she said quietly. I'm afraid that if I accept your help, something will change. You'll start telling me how to raise Diego, or he'll think that I can't take care of him on my own. I'm not going to interfere in your relationship with your son, Maria reassured her. I just want him to have all the opportunities his father could have given him had he been alive, and the ones that Valeria has. From the living room came the sound of Diego and Valeria laughing. Both of them listened to the sound. It was so natural, so unexpected in the current situation. Okay, Lucia finally said. Let's discuss this, but not today. I can't promise I'll agree. I need to think about it. That's fair, Maria nodded. We have plenty of time to talk it over. When they returned to the living room, Valeria and Diego had moved from looking at the drawings to a lively discussion about their favorite books. So, you like stories about dragons too? Diego was asking, his eyes shining. Of course, Valeria replied. When I was your age, I had a whole collection of books about them. Some of them I still have, I can lend them to you. Really? Maria watched them with surprise and quiet joy. If it weren't for their family resemblance, one could think these two had known each other for many years, so easily did they find common ground. I have something for you, Valeria suddenly said, pulling a small package from her bag. Here. Diego eagerly unwrapped the gift. Inside was a set of professional drawing pencils and a small leather-bound sketchbook. Wow, the boy exclaimed. Real art supplies. Thank you. He rushed to hug Valeria, who, for a moment, hesitated, but then awkwardly embraced him in return. I thought maybe we could draw together, Valeria suggested, pulling back slightly. I have a sketchbook that Dad, Uncle Carlos, gave me for my birthday. I've been saving it for special occasions. At the mention of Carlos, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Valeria glanced quickly at her mother, and Lucia tensed up. But Diego, it seemed, didn't notice. It was already running to his room to get the sketchbook. He really looks like Dad, Valeria said quietly when the boy was out of sight. The same gestures, the same way of speaking. Maria nodded silently. She had noticed the resemblance too, and it caused both pain and a strange sense of comfort. The evening went surprisingly smoothly, given the circumstances. They drank coffee with flan. Valeria and Diego drew together, and Maria and Lucia, sitting on opposite sides of the table, had a cautious conversation about school, the kids' hobbies, the weather, anything but what truly connected them. When it was time to say goodbye, Diego looked upset. You'll come again, right? He asked, glancing from Valeria to Maria. Soon? Of course, Valeria answered before Maria could open her mouth. If your mom doesn't mind, I could come by sometimes and show you some new drawing techniques. Lucia and Maria exchanged a look. At that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. No matter what happened between them, the children shouldn't suffer. Of course, Lucia nodded. We'd be happy. Already in the taxi on the way home, Valeria quietly said. You know, Mom, I thought it would be harder. Diego is a great kid. Yes, Maria agreed. He's a good boy. And Lucia's not bad either, Valeria continued cautiously, as if afraid to touch a sensitive subject. It's clear that she cares about him a lot. Maria remained silent, looking out the window. She wasn't ready to discuss her feelings about Lucia, too complicated, too contradictory. Mom, Valeria turned to her, what was in the letter that Dad left for me? The one we found in the bank vault? Maria flinched. They hadn't talked about that subject since the conversation. Valeria had taken the sealed envelope with her initials but never said what was inside. It's personal, Maria answered gently. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to. Valeria was silent for a long time, looking at her hands. He apologized, she finally said quietly. For not being honest with me, for not being able to create a whole family for me. And he said a little about Diego. He wrote that he wished for us to meet one day. Her voice trembled. And he also said that he always loved me and you, that all this doesn't change the fact that our family was real. Maria felt tears welling up in her throat. Despite all his mistakes, Carlos had at least tried to make things right, perhaps too late, perhaps awkwardly, but he had tried. I think he was right, she said, squeezing her daughter's hand. Our family really was real, just incomplete, as it turned out. And now? Valeria asked, lifting her eyes. What are we now? Maria didn't know what to say. They were no longer the family they once were, but they hadn't become something new either. They were stuck somewhere at a crossroads, trying to find their way in changed circumstances. We're in the process, she finally said, and that's okay. The next months were both difficult and surprising. Valeria began visiting Diego regularly and sometimes took him to exhibitions and museums. The boy blossomed in her company, proudly introducing everyone to his older sister. Maria's relationship with Lucia remained complicated. They came to a compromise about financial support. Maria opened an account in Diego's name for his future education, and Lucia agreed to accept a small monthly allowance for his current needs. But there were conflicts too. Every decision regarding Diego became a potential battleground, from choosing a school to visitation schedules. Lucia reacted strongly to any attempts by Maria to influence her son's upbringing, and Maria sometimes felt that Lucia didn't fully appreciate her help and involvement. Still, gradually, they found a common language. The shared grief for Carlos, the part of him each of them had known and loved, became a uniting factor. Sometimes, over a cup of coffee while the children were busy with their own things, they would share memories of him, carefully choosing neutral stories, but still creating a fuller picture of the man who had linked their fates. Unexpectedly, Dolores played a large role in their rapprochement. Initially, Maria's mother-in-law had vehemently refused to acknowledge the existence of her son's second family, but gradually, especially after meeting Diego, whom Valeria brought over, her stance softened. He's so much like Carlos, she said one day in a trembling voice, watching the boy intently as he excitedly assembled a model airplane. Just like he was when he was a child. This acknowledgement became a kind of blessing for their unconventional relationship. Dolores began inviting Diego over regularly, buying him gifts, calling to ask about his progress in school. She even invited Lucia to coffee a few times, meetings that started in a tense atmosphere but gradually became more relaxed. 6 months after their first meeting, Maria made an important decision. The documents from the bank vault that Carlos had left her led her to an idea, which gradually turned into plans, and then into concrete actions. She found, through Lucia's contacts, a law firm that helped migrants obtain legal documents. Part of Carlos's insurance money Maria invested in creating a small charity center where people in difficult situations could receive free legal help. Why are you doing this? Lucia asked when Maria told her about her idea. It's not your problem. Maybe I'm just trying to understand, Maria replied after a pause. Why was this so important to him? Why did he risk everything? And that was partly true. The full truth was more complicated. By creating the center, Maria was building a bridge between the two parts of Carlos's life, the ones he never managed to unite in life. She was finishing his work, but doing it in her own way, openly, legally, without secrets or lies. On the anniversary of Carlos's death, they all went together to the cemetery, Maria, Valeria, Lucia, Diego, and Dolores. It was the first time the boy learned the truth about his father, what Carlos had really been to him, and that he would never return. Diego cried, burying his face in his mother's shoulder, then stood for a long time at the gravestone, placing his best drawing on it. Am I an orphan now? He asked later, looking at Maria with his pure blue eyes, so much like Carlos's. No, Maria answered firmly, kneeling in front of him. You have a mother who loves you more than anything. You have your sister Valeria, grandmother Dolores, and I will always be there for you, if you need me." Diego thought about it for a moment, then unexpectedly hugged her tightly, trustingly. Maria froze for a second, then hugged him back, feeling something inside her finally release, the weight she had carried all this time. That evening, after everyone had left, Maria sat by the window for a long time, gazing at the stars. She thought about Carlos, about how their lives had changed after his death, about the secrets he had taken with him, and about the new reality they all had to create. They were still at the beginning of this journey. Ahead lay new conflicts and compromises, moments of closeness and distance, but for the first time in many months, Maria felt that this path wasn't leading them nowhere, that out of the fragments of their former life, something new could be built, not perfect, with seams and cracks, but still worth fighting for. The shadows of the past still darkened their present, but now Maria knew that these shadows weren't eternal, and that, while they couldn't fully get rid of them, they could learn to live in a way that would make the shadows just part of the picture, not blocking the light, but making it fuller, deeper, and more real. 2 years later. "Well, how do I look?" Maria adjusted the collar of her blouse, looking at her reflection in the mirror. "You look wonderful." Valeria, now a student at the linguistics faculty, smiled. "Just don't be so nervous, it's your project, after all." Today marked the opening of the Esperanza Support Center, a project Maria had poured not only Carlos's insurance money into but also her entire soul. A place where refugees and migrants could receive legal and social help, all completely legally. At the entrance of the small 2-story building, the invited guests had already gathered, mostly volunteers, future employees, and a few journalists. But Maria wasn't looking for them. There they are. Valeria waved her hand, spotting Dolores's car pulling up. Lucia and Diego got out. The boy had just turned 11, tall, with serious eyes, and sometimes there was a familiar spark in them that reminded Maria of his father. "Sorry we're late," Lucia said as she approached them, adjusting her blazer. Diego couldn't decide which tie to wear. "Grandma said that for important ceremonies, you have to wear a tie," Diego explained, tugging at the unfamiliar accessory. "You look great." Valeria winked at him, tousling his hair. Over these 2 years, the children had become true friends. Despite the age gap, they easily found common ground, drawing together, walking, going to exhibitions. Their bond was one of the few unquestionably good results of this complicated story. The opening ceremony went quickly and without unnecessary formality, a brief speech by Maria, a few words from Lucia, the cutting of the symbolic ribbon, and then the guests dispersed throughout the building, exploring the rooms and discussing plans. Left alone in the small director's office, Maria and Lucia silently watched the guests move from one booth to the next. Who would have thought 2 years ago that we'd be opening a refugee support center together? Maria broke the silence. "Especially considering that difficult time when we could barely talk to each other," Lucia added with a light smile. Maria nodded, recalling those hard months. They had had serious conflicts, especially when it came to raising Diego. Maria sometimes offered her help too insistently, and Lucia reacted painfully to any attempts to intervene, seeing them as a threat to her maternal authority. Everything changed about a year ago when Diego fell seriously ill. Maria rushed to the hospital in the middle of the night, sitting by Lucia's side for hours, holding her hand while doctors fought with the boy's high fever. That night, a silent understanding arose between them, shared anxiety, shared hope, shared love for the child. "You know," Lucia said quietly, watching Diego, who was talking enthusiastically to Valeria in the corner of the room, "sometimes I think that Carlos somehow foresaw all of this. It's as if he knew that we would find a way to be one family." "Family." Maria echoed the word. It still sounded strange when referring to all of them together. "I guess you're right. He would have wanted that." "Mom." Diego ran over to Lucia, holding a smartphone in his hands. "Look what Valeria came up with for our center. We want to paint a mural on the wall in the courtyard, a big tree with the names of everyone who helped create this center. And with a picture of Dad in the roots." Valeria added, walking over. "Because it all started with him." Lucia smiled softly, ruffling Diego's hair. Great idea. Just discuss it with Maria, she's the director, she gets to decide. You know I'll approve, Maria replied, especially if two such talented artists are holding the brushes. Diego beamed, then suddenly looked at his wrists, where a pair of men's wristwatches, a bit too large for his still childish hands, gleamed. Grandma Dolores is waiting for us with cake, he exclaimed. She said they won't start without us. Go ahead, Maria nodded. We'll be right there. When the children walked off, Lucia thoughtfully said, He never takes off those watches, sometimes he even sleeps with them. I know, Maria nodded. It's good that he treasures them so much. Carlos never parted with them either. The watches had been a gift from Maria to her husband in the early years of their marriage. Last year, for Diego's 10th birthday, she gave them to him. It had been a symbolic gesture. Diego was not just Carlos's son but the rightful heir to his memory, just as much a part of him as Valeria. Lucia took a small box out of her bag. I have something for you from all of us. Maria opened the box. Inside was an elegant silver bracelet with a small key-shaped pendant. This is from Diego, Valeria, and me, Lucia explained. The key is a symbol of a new beginning and our gratitude. Without you, none of this would have been possible. Maria silently put on the bracelet, unable to say a word due to the rush of emotions. Then she simply hugged Lucia tightly, sincerely, the first time in all these years. The ceremony continued with a small celebration among those who had become, over the past 2 years, a true family, with the cake Dolores had baked, with jokes and stories about how the center had been created, with plans for the future. In the evening, when the last guests had left, Lucia and Diego also began to prepare to go home. I'll take them, Dolores offered. I'll drop off Diego's things too, he's staying with me this weekend. Oh, that would be great. Lucia responded gratefully. I still have a lot of paperwork to do today. And I'm heading to a meeting with the university folks, Valeria said, hugging her mother. You don't mind? Of course not, Maria smiled. Have fun, but not too late. Maria watched as Dolores's car, with Lucia and Diego in the back seat, drove off. Valeria had already disappeared around the corner, planning to meet her friends at a cafe 2 blocks away. A cafe that Maria knew was near Lucia's house, and the area where Valeria now spent more and more of her time. Sometimes it caused Maria a vague sense of unease, as if she were gradually losing her daughter, who more and more often said, Lucia and I think. Or Diego showed me. The silence that hung in the air was both pleasant and unsettling, full of thoughts and memories. Maria returned to the building, walked down the hallway, admiring the new renovation, peeked into each room, mentally picturing how, tomorrow, these now empty rooms would be filled with people and their stories. Finally, she entered her office, a small but bright room with a desk by the window, bookshelves, and a comfortable couch for visitors. A place where, as she hoped, many people would find support and new hope. On the desk, among the papers and stationery, was a small photo in a simple frame, Carlos, smiling, on the day of their 10th wedding anniversary. She had chosen this photo on purpose. He looked the way she wanted to remember him, bright, happy, without the shadow of the burden he must have carried in his soul all those years. Maria sat in the chair, looking at the photo of her husband. The sun was setting, its last rays filling the room, creating an almost mystical atmosphere. Well, Carlos, she said softly, as if speaking to the photo. We did it, we opened the center. Now everything will be different, open, legal. But the essence is the same, to help people who have nowhere else to turn. She paused, collecting her thoughts. You know, I was angry at you for a long time, angry about the lies, the double life, for not trusting me. Sometimes I still get angry, she said with a bitter smile. There are days when I wake up and suddenly feel that resentment again, sharp as it was on the first day. Usually, it happens when Diego does something that reminds me of you, or when I notice how Valeria looks at Lucia with admiration, just like she used to look at me. Maria fell silent, gathering her thoughts. But then I remember that, perhaps, you suffered more than anyone, torn between us, trying to reconcile the irreconcilable. And slowly, I've learned to see in this story not just pain, but also light. Although, I'll admit, it's not always easy. She looked out the window at the evening sky, painted in soft shades of pink and gold. Diego is a wonderful boy. He's so much like you, not only in appearance but also in his drive to help others, that same sparkle in his eyes when he's passionate about something. Valeria adores him. It's as if they've been brother and sister all their lives. Maria sighed deeply. And you know what's amazing? I really love Diego, truly. There were moments when I resisted this feeling, as if I was betraying myself, but then I understood, he's part of you, part of our unusual family, and loving him doesn't cancel out the pain I feel because of your betrayal. They coexist. She smiled sadly at her thoughts. And Lucia? Our relationship is more complicated than it might seem from the outside. We're not best friends. There will always be something unresolved between us. But we've learned to respect each other and find compromises. She fell silent. Life is amazing, isn't it? Sometimes it feels like everything is falling apart, and then from those pieces, something new grows, not perfect, with seams and cracks, but still worth fighting for. Maria reached out and lightly touched the photo with her fingertips. I've learned to live again, Carlos. Not the way we used to, differently, fuller, maybe more honestly. I now understand the value of truth, no matter how bitter, and I understand the value of forgiveness. Suddenly, her phone, lying on the desk, vibrated. The screen lit up with the name, Diego. Maria smiled and answered. Hello. Aunt Maria, came Diego's excited voice. I just wanted to say thank you for everything. The center is so cool, and Valeria and I have already figured out how we'll paint the mural. And Grandma Dolores said we're making your favorite tres leches cake this weekend. You'll come, right? I'll definitely come. Maria promised, feeling warmth in her heart. But now, don't cause any trouble at Grandma's. Okay? Okay, the boy sighed in agreement. See you tomorrow. See you tomorrow, Diego. Maria ended the call. She sat for a while, staring at the empty screen of the phone, then turned her gaze back to the photo of her husband. Everything will be okay, Carlos, she said quietly. Not as we planned once, not as it could have been if everything had turned out differently, but still, it will be okay. She stood up and walked to the window. The sun had almost set, but its last rays still bathed the rooftops in gold. Tomorrow would be a new day, with new tasks, new stories of people who needed help, and she would be ready for it, not alone, but with the support of her new, unexpected, but so real family. The shadows of the past hadn't gone away, they would always be there, wherever there was light. But now these shadows didn't frighten Maria, they had become part of the drawing of her life, more complex, more profound than the one she had once dreamed of. Perhaps that's why it felt more real. Maria turned off the light in the office and closed the door. Tomorrow began a new stage of her life, and she was ready for it. Dear listeners, did you enjoy the story? Please rate our work with a like and a subscription if you liked the story. Share your impressions in the comments. It's the best way to motivate us to create for you every day. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Be happy.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.